The push to expand Medicaid in North Carolina has taken another major step forward.
The State House today approved a bill that would increase the number of insured people starting January 1st of next year. WECT's Michael Pratt spoke with one of the House members from southeastern North Carolina who voted for that plan. Michael, Representative Deb Butler says she's optimistic this proposal will finally make it to the governor's desk.
Yeah, she is, Fran. Right now, there's 11 states, including North Carolina, that have refused to expand their Medicaid programs. But after today's vote in the House, there are some signs that the tide is turning.
Deb Butler and other Democratic lawmakers have pushed for Medicaid expansion for more than a decade, but they faced resistance from Republicans each time.
We voted on it yesterday, and it did pass the House in a bipartisan manner. You know, Democrats have been advocating for Medicaid expansion for 12 years, and it looks like we might be there.
With a vote of 92 to 22, the expansion of Medicaid bill passed the House Thursday and is headed to the state Senate. It had nearly as many Republicans supporting it, 45, as it did Democrats with 47. Butler says it's a big step in the right direction to improving access to health care. She believes expansion of the federal program will help fill a gap for folks who right now don't qualify for Medicaid.
You know, I think North Carolina is going to enjoy $4.4 billion worth of revenue, and our citizens who fall into that donut hole where they're not covered, you know, the people who are working, 70% of these folks who will be covered are working.
Representative Donnie Lambeth from Forsyth County is the primary sponsor of the bill. He explained during the Finance Committee meeting earlier this week, if this bill does not pass, the repercussions could impact hundreds of thousands of people.
We may find ourselves having to take about 300,000 people off the Medicaid rolls. Some might think that's fine, but that's not a good scenario, I think, for North Carolina.
And nearly all of the House members from our part of the state supported the bill. Pender County Representative Carson Smith voted no. Smith provided us with a statement about his reasons for voting against the bill, citing what he calls out-of-control federal spending. You can read his entire statement inside this article on our website. Michael Pratt, WECT News.